So you've seen them around, they often get brought up into the conversation, but what's the big deal between the mystic eyes of depth perception? We got a question here from the Watching Hat. He says, I wonder why Ryougi and Tono's mystic eyes look different. And he wants to know if they are the same type of mystic eyes, or do they just appear that way because of their design? Let's start off with the things that we do know. The mystic eyes of depth are some of the best mystic eyes that you can possibly have. I mean, it's no coincidence that they are the highest grade of mystic eyes going by the ranking system at the clock tower, putting them even higher than somebody like Toko's mystic eyes, who we know is one of the greatest mages to ever exist. A mage would give their life, their fortune, or even their left nut just to have a pair of these eyes. I kid you not, they're just that lethal. When it comes to the actual power itself, it goes like this. Anything that exists will ultimately come to an end, and due to them having these eyes, they are able to expedite the process by cutting the lines and the points that they see from them. It's really more to say they have an authority over death itself. First and foremost, you can only acquire these eyes if you've had a near-death experience, something the two of them have already been through. They now see these lines and points that appear on pretty much everything in the world. The more familiar they became with their powers, the more extensive they become with being able to use them. And it's a high cost to have these eyes. What you thought this level of power came for free? There's a certain level of mental anguish that the average person would have to deal with just from having these eyes, which would cause most people to go insane. Even if another mage was able to get a hold of a pair, he would likely end up clawing out his own eyes because that would be less painful than dealing with the mental stress. That is, if he could get his hands on a pair to begin with. The eyes themselves are so rare that Shiki Ryougi and Shiki Tono are some of the only two people who are known to even have them. So to get into that first part, they do have the same type of eyes, but their appearance and the way that they go about functioning does have their own variations. If we're looking just by the appearance, you'll notice that Ryougi has a set of eyes that dons a lot more vibrance in their design, and that's something that stems from their continuously complex background. Prior to the Tsukihime remake, it was understood that Ryougi had the de facto stronger eyes of the two, but with the new feats that we've seen from Shiki Tono in the Tsukihime remake, it's safe to say that they're now around the same level. For example, there was a fight back in Kara no Kyokai where Shiki Ryougi went against Fujino, and from that fight we've seen that she was capable of cutting the intangible. Fujino also has mystic eyes. She has the mystic eyes of distortion, and this allows her to channel into her psychic abilities. Being more specific, she can use telekinesis. There was a point in the fight where she tried to hit Ryougi directly with her telekinetic powers, and Ryougi just sliced straight through it. Yes, Ryougi was able to slice through telekinesis itself. Don't see that too often. And I know that sounds ridiculous. Fujino's mystic eyes are extremely powerful in their own right, and this should have easily contorted Shiki's entire body and thrown her through a wall, and it wasn't even able to reach her. Same thing goes for Shiki Tono. Even in the original Tsukihime, Tono has been shown not only dismembering somebody's entire body completely, but their soul as well. He was capable of piercing Roa, someone who is dead apostle ancestor level, and erase his existence entirely, which normally wouldn't even be possible because Roa can always reincarnate. By the time of the story, he's done this almost 20 times, and Shiki was one of the only people who was able to stop it. To outright erase someone's soul is a feat that's on par with true magic. Depending on who you ask, it's greater than true magic, and they both accomplish these types of things just by them using a pocket knife. That's all. The knife itself doesn't even have actual power, it just does the cutting. It's a vehicle for them to get their powers across, and the living or the intangible isn't the only thing that they have authority over. They can also cut through objects. In fact, Tono himself has been shown to make slices merely by just using one of his fingers. The only thing with this is by doing it this way, he does have his limitations, still busted nonetheless. And Roa isn't the only ancestor that he's taken out. He's taken out Vlad, he's taken out Nero, he helped against Wallachia. We're talking centuries worth of magical information foundation crumble at the tip of a knife. And he's just a human. They're both just humans. And though it may not seem like it, they both also come from a family of highly trained demon hunters. Shiki Ryogi coming from the Ryogi clan, and then Shiki Tono originally coming from the Nania clan. His real name is Shiki Nania. So to go into some of the actual differences, Tono in particular has a subset ability known as the Pure Eyes that focus on his Nania background, thus tapping into his latent psychic abilities. And a lot of this really shows when he starts to get into combat. Ryogi, on the other hand, while she doesn't have the Pure Eyes exactly, she does have a unique foundation by having her connection through the root. Again, the root is pretty much where every magus wants to reach. It's the reason that people participate in Holy Grail wars or spend their entire life to research magecraft in general. And here you have Ryogi, who is practically born with this connection. All she had to do was tap into it. This would later be coined as her third personality, known as Void Shiki. Of the two of them, her connection to the root has always made her stronger overall due to the root's authority over the world. Remember, the root is what's granting the wishes through the Grail process to begin with. That's where it's coming from. So Ryogi herself, and as she's already mentioned, is essentially a god of her verse. And if she chose to, she could deconstruct the laws themselves if she decided to do so. Of course, we'll never get to see this because it's too busted, and then there will be no story, but you get the idea. I will point out the fact that Ryogi does appear as a unique addition in Fate Extra, if you haven't seen that. And even in Fate Extra, it's jokingly explained that she made her way into the Fate timeline simply because she got lost. She literally cut a rift into space and wandered into the Fate worlds. That's just teasing the type of level that she's on. This is before she got added into FGO, of course, from being a fan favorite. Then there's Tono, from what we've seen in the Tsukihime remake, where he was capable of going against Arkaway even in her luminary form. Understand that this form literally can recover from any normal attack instantly. Everything that you try to do against her normally wouldn't work. And despite this fact, it was this same set of eyes that allowed him to bypass her conceptual defense and pierce her core. This is something that very few mages, or any character for that matter, could have done something to stop. This doesn't even include her other abilities in this form, like her mystic eyes that can completely immobilize your body whether you look at her or not. Going beyond the things that's already been mentioned, if they see a set of lines in your arm, they can amputate your arm. Same thing for your legs, your neck, any part of your body. If they see a set of lines in a building, there is a portion of Tsukihime where Tono started to destroy an entire building just by hitting one of its depth points. If they're capable of seeing your depth points, just like the building, they can skip the dismembering and outright just get rid of your body altogether with one strike. We've seen this in circumstances like when Tono went up against Nero, or Ryogi went against the Magus, Sora and Arya. Even when Tsukihime first started, Shiki was able to cut Arkaway into 17 pieces with this power alone, and she was forced to have to use majority of her energy to put herself back together. True Ancestor, by the way, one of the highest existences in the verse, by the way. And this is before he even knew what he was doing with his powers. And telekinesis, or souls, aren't the only concepts that they can cut through. They can cut through other spells and straight up negate them. They can cut through diseases and mental attacks. If you try to use projectiles against them, they can cut through those if they want to. Multiple of them at the same time. Tono especially, considering that we've seen that he can speed blitz the air with just one arm. When Vlad tried to use his ice projectiles against him, which would be equivalent to getting shot with swords, he blitzed all of them, every single one of them, in absolute zero temperature. On top of that, the two of them have been shown to have a similar style in terms of deployment, both of them having those red lines that pervade through everything in sight. There's also the fact that Ryogi, and this again can be thanks to her connection to the root, has never really had a true issue with having these eyes like someone would normally, whereas Shiki Tono literally had to wear a pair of mystic codes to negate the effects of these eyes because he couldn't actually turn them off, and they were in a constant loop of fracturing his mind. His glasses aren't just for show, they literally block out the ability because they were so powerful. He does start to overcome this, however, the further you get into the story. Tono does have a better physical ability than Ryogi thanks to his pure eyes, or depending on his route in the story, him tapping into Roa's Dead Apostle influence, which by extension lets him gain access to a Dead Apostle's physical prowess, superhuman speed, incredible reflexes on top of the ones that he already has as an assassin. He really gets wild. If the two of them run into a complex entity, instances like Sora and Arya for example, when Ryogi first fought against Soren, she couldn't see the lines in his body because his general makeup was just out of her realm of understanding. But the more that she fought against him, her eyes started to recognize his foundation better, and she still eventually produced a point where she was able to take him down. Soren by this point was literally supposed to be immortal to her, meaning that these eyes are not only extremely powerful, but they have potential to scale as well. Ilya has mystic eyes, believe it or not, that allows you to influence another person. Those pale in comparison. Arkaway also has mystic eyes that allows you to enchant others. She's mentioned that she could use this to completely control Tono's body if she really wanted to. Hers pale in comparison. Hell, Arkaway herself called Tono a monster for even having the mystic eyes of death. Before there was King Hassan, these two are the ones that pioneered being that walking sense of death personified. Bump just having a regular sword, they don't even need a sword, or to be a servant, or a noble phantasm. If there was ever an example of one of a kind, they're it, without a doubt. The biggest difference is their background in general and how they came to exist. That's really what sets them apart. It's not the eyes exactly, it's the wielders themselves.